Welcome back. If you're just joining us, this is Weekend Express, and you're just in time for our conversation part of the show. For the next 30 minutes, we want to put a spotlight when it comes to suicide here in Kenya. Before on the break, we went on break. I told you the World Health Organization has put around 3.2% of Kenyans committing suicide annually, annually that is, and that puts at about 4 people committing it every single day. At the end of the year, we have about 1,408 Kenyans who commit suicide. Take a look at this. The World Suicide Prevention Day, that's what we will be marking. So annually around the globe, about 800,000 people commit suicide. That's one suicide in every 4 seconds, as you can see. And most of these suicides come from low and middle income countries where there are huge gaps in health systems. The second leading cause of death is in between the ages of 15 to 29 years of age. That's quite astonishing. They are 15 to 29, pretty young people. And one suicide, 135 people suffer intense grief. And for every one suicide, 25 make an attempt on their lives. Back here in Kenya, 42% of those attending general medical facilities in Kenya have symptoms of severe depression. There's the statistics I mentioned earlier about, according to the World Health Organization, estimating about 1,408 people dying from suicide. And the suicidal thoughts, which are associated with depression, lifetime prevalences, is estimated at about 7.9%. So if you're to put all this in figures, simple figures, that means 4 people in Kenya commit suicide every day, hence the number 1,408 as you have on your screen. All right, so to help us understand this and sort of get this topic moving forward, I'm joined here by Ruth Mauro. She is a psychologist by profession, to help us understand this suicide prevention for 2018. 15 to 29 years old is such a young age demographic for us here in Kenya to be losing such young people. On your screens, numbers will be displayed, so at home you can be part of this conversation. You can call in, share your thoughts, ask your questions, and so forth. Ruth, it's so good to have you here. All right, let's begin first of all by demystifying and try to understand what suicide is. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah,
because you find that suicide is the attempt of cause of death. Mm-hmm. So you find that suicide is one of the causes of death among people. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, and that statistics have showed that it's quite sad because, normally here in Kenya and in the African continent, you hear suicide and we are like, those are problems for the West world. We never face, suicide. Do you have a problem with depression? For a man, go drink it or go, punch a wall or something. For a woman, get over yourself, And for every single day, 15 to 29, when did we get to this state as a nation? What has driven us to that, to such scary figures?
Mm-hmm. I think as a nation first, or maybe as a community, as a people, we don't talk about mental health.
Here in Kenya?
Yes. And also we don't even talk about suicide. So you find that suicide is part of mental health. And we find as a country there's a lot of stigma when it comes to mental health, a lot of discrimination when it comes to mental health. So you find people are not talking about mental health. At least maybe recently people are doing it. But in the past, mental health was an area that was not discussed.
Right.
Yeah, so there was a lot of stigma. So you find that most people, as much as they are having mental health difficulties, conditions, illnesses, they don't talk about it. When people have issues with their mental health, they don't talk about it. So it was a hushed thing. People just keep quiet. They're not talking about depression. They're not talking about any mental illnesses.
Right.
Yeah.
On the ground, have things changed in terms of conversation? Are people, we as Kenyans, are we beginning to talk about mental health, suicide prevention, which we'll even continue talking about? But are things changing on the ground for the better?
They are. And I am grateful with what the media is doing. I think there's a lot of awareness that is being created. So you find that there are conversations even on social medias, people are slowly starting to speak about mental health, which is a good thing. But I think we still have a long way to go. But I think we shall reach there. But we've started the steps towards talking about mental health.
Right.
Yeah.
Statistics, the ones that we've just seen, said 15 to 29 years of age are people who are more likely to commit suicide. 15 to 29.
Yeah.
This, for some, it's your prime time years. You are young. 15, you're still probably in high school. 29, your career has just taken off, or you're at the peak of your career. What would make someone between the ages of 15 to 29 commit suicide?
And you find it's very unfortunate. I saw a case of even of a 12-year-old last week, I think in Ngong.
Wow.
And it was very unfortunate. So I think you find that 15 to 29 years is the period where there's that transition. You find that this is the period of first adolescence. So you find that these are young people that are transiting from childhood into adulthood. So there's a lot of changes. First, physically, psychologically, cognitively, there are a lot of changes. You find that when you say 15, this is a person who is either in high school, so 15 is a person who is in high school. Then by the time somebody reaches 29, it's early career. So you find that these are people maybe who have been having a lot of issues. So you find that most people, especially this age group, they don't talk about their feelings, the issues that they are going through, and especially now when they are transiting from childhood into adulthood. So you find that confusion. First, you find this is a young person who wants to know who they are. So there's a lot of self-identity. Who am I as a person? They also want to get away from their parents. So initially, the young people had their parents who are close to them, and they will talk to them. Have you ever seen the teenagers who put things on their doors to say,
yes,
no adults?
Yes, no, don't enter.
No entry into this room. So you find that then as parents, we find that we assume that after 18, now this is a grown-up. This person can now take care of themselves. But you find they still need that close supervision. They still need somebody to talk to them. So you find that role identity confusion where this person is trying to first get away from their family, their parents, and now start identifying with their peers. So you find that is where the issue is coming about.
Exclusion.
Yeah.
So what should they be doing? What should we be doing at that time? Is that is that the right time to then, instead of secluding yourself, you should be more open to other people, be more open to your parents? And we'll talk about the role of parents in just a few minutes. But then at that point, you've clearly misspelled for us what happens at that age. You know, you want to lock your room, you don't want to be disturbed. How then is the healthy way to go through that patch?
Yeah, so you find it's also key for parents. You see, like, as much as, yes, the young ones, they want independence, they want to know who they are as a people, they also want to identify, what do I want to be when I grow up?
Right.
So it's key for parents also, as much as there's this transition, they also come in. So don't just leave them because now they are growing up and they want that independence. You also need to be close to them so that you can always know and get to know the signs that there's a problem. So parents need to be close to their children so that if anything is amiss, they're able to identify, here there's a problem and this is what we can do. Yes.
The other thing that I've even come to notice as well is that there's this thought, there's this mentality when you hear that young people are depressed. The notion behind it is, what do you have to be depressed for? Our lippy bills, etc. There's that, especially now for people in high school, they ask you, what is it that you have to be depressed about? What? Schoolwork, homework. Everyone has gone through that patch. How do you respond to such a person?
And you find it's very unfortunate, and it's a misconception. You find that young people have psychological issues.
Right.
It's not about the fact that this person is not working, they're still in school, but other issues. You find that there are children or young persons who are coming from families where there's divorce, families where there's chronic illness, families where there is death. So you find that also these young people have their own issues. That role confusion where they're trying to identify who they are also is a problem to them. So you find that as much as this person is trying to get into adulthood, there's a lot of issues that are happening in between. So you find that the misconception that people have, especially as a society, that young people can't depress, they can't have psychological issues, is wrong. And it's something that we need now to look at it, because now that is discouraging even the young ones from seeking help, because people assume you don't have issues. So a young person who is going through psychological issues and distress, they don't know how to talk about it, because everyone assumes that it's teenagehood, it's fun.
What do you have to be stressed
exactly,
about?
yeah. So you find that most people, the young ones who are stressed, they don't know who to talk up to. And you find that sometimes they get the wrong information from their peers. So you find that this young one, because that period of time, they are listening more to their peers. So you find that they'll go to their peers and tell them, I've been having these issues, I've been having even suicidal ideations. They're like, we wacha ufala. You see, so they get the wrong information from their peers, and they also don't know how to involve the adult, how to engage the adult and tell them, I'm having issues that I need help with. So I think it's for us now to be open to these conversations where we encourage our young ones to talk.
Okay. Yeah. Right now our phone lines are open, so if you're watching at home, wherever you are, you can be part of this conversation here in studio. The Suicide Prevention 2018 report, as I've mentioned, shows that here in Kenya, we are now talking about Kenya, that 42% of people who attend the general medical facilities in Kenya have symptoms of severe depression. Ruth, what are these symptoms of severe depression?
So you find the symptoms first you find is hopelessness. So you find that this is a person who has despaired.
Given up.
They have given up. Also, you find that a person talks about death. So preoccupation with death. They talk about how can somebody die. I am a burden to this society. I don't think I don't feel like living anymore. Then you also find there's withdrawal. So you find a person who was maybe initially this was a person who was outgoing. They were involved in different activities. All of a sudden, they don't want to involve themselves in activities that they liked.
Right.
So you find that also self-care neglect. You find that this person now does not take care of themselves. So you find this person, you just find there's something, a disconnect, where you find this person no longer now takes care of themselves. They don't shower, they don't get out of the house, they want to stay alone. So those withdrawals, you just see a change of behavior and also the mood. So you find somebody was initially happy and okay, they suddenly change. Yeah, so it's for us to be keen about change of behavior and also change of mood. Yes.
Now, let's come back to parents. What's the role of parents, their role in terms of being there for their children, 15 to 29 years?
Yeah, I think as parents, the most important thing is for them now to encourage conversations, because you find that people fear even talking about suicide. Like I asking you, what have you been thinking about? Talking about suicide, we have this misconception that if I talk about suicide, like I am initiating somebody to start or to think about suicide.
Right.
But it's a misconception. We find most people, when you talk about suicide, maybe somebody was thinking about even like attempting suicide. So when you talk about suicide, they're like, okay, so this is a start of a conversation. So I think as parents, it's for us to be keen in starting conversation on issues that are affecting our young one. Let them feel free to come to you when they have issues. So like have that openness platform where young ones, if they're having issues, they can be able now to open up to you.
Right.
And also for parents to be keen, because you find that when you hear these the cases of attempted suicide and death by suicide, parents say that they saw signs. There was something amiss with their children.
So Ruth, parents would be asking, who are watching, they could be asking, how do I begin this conversation with my children?
Yeah.
How do you begin?
You just started from where it is. You see, like when you start noticing their changes, like if I have maybe my young one, and I notice their changes in their behavior.
Right.
There are things they used to do and they have stopped doing. I have to talk to them, call them, ask them, what is happening? Is there an issue in your life? Like, I've noticed these changes, and point it out. If this is a person who was lively, they engage in activities, specific activities, talk to them, ask them. Initially, this is what you used to do. Initially, this is how you were as a person. But I can see their changes. What is happening? That alone initiates the conversation. So it's for parents to be keen on those behavior change and point them out, because most times you find that parents maybe assume it's that transition. You see, like a 13-year-old, 14-year-old, 15-year-old, parents assume it is teenagehood. So they say, that's teenagehood, they'll just get over it.
All right.
But point it out. Okay. Yeah, it could be a start of a conversation.
So Ruth, let's talk directly to Kenyans. I have Denver from Voi who is calling in. Denver, thank you so much for being part of this conversation. Denver, perhaps your comment or question and your contribution? Denver, can you hear me? All right, so Denver.
Hello.
Good morning, how are you?
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, hello.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm very fine.
Yes, perhaps your question or contribution. Thank you so much for calling in.
Yeah, it's my contribution. Yeah, as for me, I'm also a victim. I once tried to commit suicide.
Go on. Yeah, you once tried to commit suicide?
Yeah, I once tried to commit suicide. And the problem was, as Maura is saying, that you find that sometimes parents cannot get to know about the whereabouts of their kids. Like you find that your kid has some problem. Like me, I had some problem. My parents forgot to tell them something. They don't understand you. So you start getting depression. Until now, you find that like there's no one who's going to hear your ideas. You try expressing yourself. No one is ever trusting your ideas. Yeah.
And you tried to talk to your parents as well?
Yeah, you talk to them, but you see, they just ignore. They think like maybe you're overthinking something. Like me, I'm a graduate, so telling them I want to start a business, you see, but they can't help you. You think maybe you want to con their money. Maybe you tell them, okay, then let me find a job, but you can't help me to get a job. I've been 2 years outside the university. So you see, your peers have gone there, they've got some jobs, they're still at home, you're still jobless. So you think like the world is to an end.
Right.
Yeah?
Right.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you tried to commit suicide. Is that something that you are continuously trying to work on?
No. I'm not trying to. No. In fact, up to date, it haunts me. Yeah. It's not a good thing about thinking about committing suicide. I can even tell the other people who are trying to commit suicide, it's not a good thing to in your life.
What would you advise someone who is watching? What would you tell them? Because you've been there before. What would you advise someone who is watching? How would you encourage them?
Yeah. Somebody who is watching, what I'm going to advise him or her is to never try to commit suicide. Just come to a conclusion. Even if you know somebody to yourself, go maybe find a cleric or somebody elder, like your grandfather or your grandmother. You try to talking to them, but never try in giving up, because the world, the future depends on you. You see.
And at some point, did you also try and get help, or do you consistently get? Do you see a professional like a psychologist as well?
No, yeah. I saw one at a hospital here in Joseph. A lady, she helped me, and also they had called my mom, and they talked to her. Nowadays she understands me. You see, sometimes back I used to be a drunkard, so nobody could hear my ideas.
All right, thank you so much for calling and being part of this conversation. All right, we also have Sylvan from Eldoret. Sylvan, good morning. Thank you as well for calling in. How are you today? Sylvan, can you hear me? All right, Sylvan, can you hear me? All right, as we try and get to Sylvan so she can also contribute. Hello, Sylvan. How are you? All right, we'll try and work on that connection. But I love what the first caller, Denver from Voice, said. He tried to commit suicide. He tried to talk to his parents. It wasn't the best. And for him, he was a graduate who also has a business. So there's all that factor. This is a clear indication of what happens when parents don't give you the support. When you go to them and they don't give you the support, then what's next for someone?
Yeah, we find out, because most young ones, especially the ones that we talk to, they say about the social support. The lack of social support is key. So we find that when they lack that social support, it becomes a problem. And especially now from the significant people like the parents who now they need to get support from. So I think maybe also as a society, we also need to encourage maybe self-help groups, support groups, things that can be working in the community.
Right.
Where you find that there's a self-help group where young people can even get funding. Because find that mostly you find like the banks and these financial institutions, they don't give loan, especially maybe to young people who are just starting up.
Right.
So you find there's this young person who wants to start a business, but they do not have the capital. So can we have like self-help groups in the community where this young one can be able to get funding even if they're just starting up? I think that will go a long way. Yeah.
Now, Ruth, the other thing is, how can you be there? What's the right way, right, to be there for someone? So that way they also don't feel as if they are being a burden to their friends and family. That way they don't feel like, okay, now people are just feeling pity, woe for me. So how, as friends and family, now turning the coin on us, how can we be there? Is there a right way to be there for someone? Yeah.
I think the conversation, still I go back to the conversation, like for them to just know you're there. You know, these conversations that we have with a person, you just rightly tell them that I am here for you. In case of anything, just talk to me. So they just know that at the end of the day, if I'm having any issues, there's somebody to talk to. And then also encourage the support whereby once in a while you get in a group where you're talking about issues, general issues. So you find that meeting up and people are able to open up and even debrief and talk about issues that I've been having during the week. I think it goes a long way in helping them cope.
All right, so Sylvan from Eldoret, we finally have you on the line. Sylvan, good morning.
Good morning to you, Cici.
How are you today?
I'm fine. I'm very sorry it was a network problem.
Yes.
Kwanza ninataka niseme ya kwamba Cici, nimekuja Eldoret kuona mgonjwa fulani ambaye ameweza kufikiwa hospitali. Na I am so grateful and she is aware anakuoja anaitwa Isaac Stewart and we thank God. Kwa sababu ameweza kutoka hospitali na ameweza kuwa mzuri, amepona. My question kwa ni nini inafanya mtoto mdogo wa darasa la 8 kusema ya kwamba anaweza kuwa akiongoza kwa shule? All of a sudden, rafiki yake ambaye alikuwa na kompyuta yeye number 1, number 2, alafu akashinda yeye, unasikia mwisho amecommit suicide. Na kuna jambo, alafu kuna to heart on top of that, kuna jambo moja ambalo watu wanasema ya kwamba commit suicide it's like a curse because lazima kuna moja ya babu wake ambaye amecommit suicide long time ago. Is it true ya kwamba kama mzee fulani ambaye ni wa familia yetu amecommit suicide 20 years ago, inaweza kuja kufuata watoto wake?
Okay.
My question.
So you have two questions. The question on whether suicide is a curse, and number 2, what would commit a very young person. You had put the age at around 12, if I'm not 15.
Around 13 years. 13 years.
13 years.
Yeah, because standard 8 years, 13 years to 12 years.
Right, okay. So Ruth, our psychologist here on set, will help us understand that right after we talk to the next caller. Gabriel Owino is calling in from Kisumu. Gabriel, how are you?
I'm fine.
How are you today?
I'm fine.
What's your conversation? What's your contribution to the conversation?
Hello?
Hello, nakusikia?
Nimesikia mkiongea kuhusu suicide. Hello?
Yes, suicide is what we're talking about.
Yeah, sasa. Nimejaribu kufanya hiyo kitu. Lakini nilifikiria sana hadi nikatoka kwa nyumba yangu nikaenda hadi huko barini huko. Hello?
Yes, endelea, nakusikia.
Na kuna mama mwingine alikutana na mimi akajaribu kuongea na mimi, akaanza nikaona hiyo kitu sio solution. Sasa mimi naomba tu wazazi wapate jukumu yenye wanaweza kaa chini na watoto wao ili wanaweza ongea. Hawezi fanya kitu kama hiyo, na watu wa maintain kwenda church sana. Hiyo ndio itawasaidia.
Thank you so much, Gabriel. Wow.
Yeah.
So for Gabriel there, it wasn't even a matter of a question. For him, he said that he was also once there and that he really urges parents to check on their children. Just what you're echoing. Yeah. But let's get back to Sylvia from Eldoret. Sylvia asked two questions. Yeah. What can drive a 13-year-old? And from the description that she gave of a 13-year-old, he or she seems to be very smart. She mentioned something about being top of their class, very active in school. What would make a 13-year-old commit suicide, Ruth?
Yeah, so we still go back to interactions between, because we find that people have a lot of misconceptions, and we find that when it comes to suicide, there's an interaction between the biological, the social, the environment, the cultural. So we find that as much as we assume that 13-year-olds are too young to be maybe having psychological distress, but you find that when you go back, maybe this young one who is 13-year-old, you find that there are a lot of issues. Maybe this is a person who is even going through maybe physical abuse. Maybe this is a person who has gone through sexual abuse. This is a young person maybe who has gone through bullying. Also is another issue that is even driving a lot of young ones into attempting suicide. Okay. So I think it's for us to just get to establish what is happening, because we find that there's a lot of things maybe they are thinking about that are causing them distress. So it's us now to go back and ask them.
Okay, before I let you go, Ruth, I have to ask you this one question. Especially what can people, not people, but what can businesses and even the government at large do? Government handling definitely the public sector and business within the private entity. What can they do to make sure that their employees are also mentally stable? The reason why I ask this, you look at a lot of the big corporates in America, the banks and the hedge funds and so forth, they employ in-house psychologists that their employees can go and talk to. It's not something that I've seen here in Kenya. Perhaps what would you want to see being done on that front? Yes, from a public sector, which is from the government, but also private sector.
Yeah, sure. And it helps because you find that when you have mental health in the workplace, mental health in the schools, mental health at the churches, it goes a long way. So I think for the workplaces, to ensure that they're having mental health awareness, mental health there's a part of mental health where if a person is having issues with their psychological, maybe distress or anything, they can have somebody to talk to. So employ psychologists.
Right.
We are here, employers.
Yeah.
We're also having a program. I work at an organization called Thalia. We are key on programs to do with mental health, because first is awareness. When people are aware about mental health, they're able to seek help. Wow. So we are looking at programs to target the workplace, to target schools, to target the churches, whereby where we go to schools, we talk to them about mental health.
Oh boy, I almost forgot Sylvia's question. She asked about curses. And this is, okay, of course, curses have nothing to do with suicide. I want to believe that. But nevertheless, I feel like where Sylvia was coming from, she's sort of showing the fact that sometimes our African ideologies from our culture can really feed negatively into suicide. When you say, like, given such an example that mental health is a curse. Quickly comment on that.
Yeah, so it's a misconception. Like mental health is an illness. So when you go back to the myths about mental health, especially when it comes to suicide, as a society, I think we need to demystify them, so that now, because when you say it is a curse, people, persons who are having issues with their mental health, they won't seek help.
True.
Because now people know I am cursed, so they won't seek help. So it's for us now to stigmatization to go down, and also as a government, decriminalize suicide.
Thank you so much, Ruth. Ruth Maura, she's a psychologist, and today our conversation was on suicide prevention after the report that we saw from the Ministry of Health 2018. Let's take a quick commercial break, a breather. When you come back, you get to meet a fantastic gentleman and hear his story that has gotten a lot of people talking on social media. And of course, this will encompass the conversation on kidneys and health when it comes to that. And again, our phone lines will be open for this part of the conversation. So right now, fill up your breakfast, your cup of tea or coffee, whatever you're having, and we'll be right back after this break.